tasting like a boss, but we're not tasting anything today, so I guess it's tipping like a boss. But we're still going to call it tasting like a boss, because why not? I got Dustin Henderson here saying hello, hi, and we're going to get some tips on cold brewing today. Now, we've had a couple of requests from viewers about getting some tips on cold brew. And I know that for those out there, hey Dustin, for those out there who already cold brew, you're probably thinking, well, it's really not that hard. This should only take about 5 to 10 seconds. But let's be real. I'm going to be real. The first time I had cold brew, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was really good. And I just didn't even think to cold brew anything myself because I thought it had to be involved somehow. I thought there must be some sort of machine. I don't know. But of course I looked into it, and cold brewing coffee is not hard at all. When you think about it, most of us who've had coffee either have it through espresso or drip. And what's going on is you are pulling from the coffee bean its flavors and qualities using energy through heat in the water. So when you use drip, you've got this high heat water that allows you to pull it out within a couple of seconds. It's dripped, it's done. Sometimes you'll use French press, where you take near boiling water, if not boiling water, you pour it onto the grounds, wait about 5 minutes, press it down. That's right, Dustin. And then you've got your French press. Espresso, you're taking high level heat water, and you're pushing it with a lot of pressure. So you've got a significant amount of pressure, plus you have the kinetic energy of the heat, and that's how you pull out the qualities of the coffee. But if you don't need to do it quickly, that's where cold brew comes into effect. I like what he just stares at like, hey guys. Cold brewing coffee doesn't mean you have to use ice cold coffee. It just means you should be using room temperature water or slightly less. And what you're going to be doing is pouring that water over coffee grounds, letting it sit for a long period of time, anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, and then enjoying the coffee. As a result, the coffee will taste different, because when you brew coffee, either through drip or French press or espresso, what you're doing is you are pulling out the elements of the coffee, but by using heat as the energy to withdraw, as opposed to time to allow it to withdraw, you're pulling out elements of the coffee that some people really enjoy. Some people like the bitterness of coffee. Some people like to have that acidic aspect of the coffee, and that's great because coffee is acidic. It's just going to be, even when you cold brew it. But the taste is not going to be the same as what you do when you cold brew it. Cold brew will be not as bitter. It doesn't taste as acidic. The flavors are more mellow. I happen to find myself enjoying it a lot more. So if you're going to cold brew, you may ask, what am I supposed to use? Now, you can use a French press if you want to, but here's another tip. When you are grinding your beans, first of all, I'm a big advocate for grinding beans. If you're already getting your beans pre-ground, that's fine. But to get an exceptional cold brew, I like to get coffee and grind it on coarse ground. I don't use a spice mill. Some people use those little cheap little spice mills where you put your coffee and you buzz it for a little bit and the blades go around and there's some thunder and it cuts up the coffee bean the way you want it. But I find that it does not actually grind it uniformly. I like to use a burr grinder. They're a little more expensive, but I make coffee enough that it means a lot to me. Or if you want to grind it at the store, you can, but I would set it for your cold brew to coarse. You don't want it super fine like espresso, and you don't want it just middle like drip. I would set it to super coarse. Next thing you're going to do is when you pour the water in, again, it can be room temperature water. It can be colder water. It doesn't have to be ice cold water. That doesn't really make a lot of sense anyway. But you want to use good water. You don't have to use bottled water. You can use tap water if your tap water is good. I have the pleasure of living here in Florida, and we have the benefit of the aquifer. So the water that comes out of my tap is better than most drinking water that other states are going to have. Sorry, it's just true. But if you're going to use water, you don't want to use rancid water, because the idea that coffee is just going to mask the taste of rancid water, that's not going to fly. At the same time, I am not someone who believes that you need to use alkaline water. In fact, I would suggest you not use alkaline water, because what is going on is obviously you've got there's the calcium, the magnesium in the water, of typical water. Water itself is acidic to some point. If by making an alkaline, Do I feel that it affects the flavor of what is pulled out the cold brew process? Yeah, I do. And I want you to understand that if you use alkaline water to make coffee, you aren't going to end up with an alkaline coffee. To actually get alkaline coffee, there's a process to do that. I'm not going to do it, and it's actually kind of expensive if you want to buy it. But if that's your thing, that's fine. Just know there's a way to get alkaline cold brew coffee. You can search on YouTube and decide if you want to try that. It's not my cup of tea. I don't need it, and it's too expensive, I think, for me. I don't have a health issue, knock on wood, that needs me to have that at this point. So what should you use to actually brew the coffee? Well, I indicated before you could use a French press, but I don't want to use a French press. I'd like to use a cold brew coffee maker. Now, I went to the store the other day and I did, Dustin. I went to the store. I was at Target. I went to Target and I saw these cold brew coffee makers. And really all they were plastic versions of essentially a French press. And the problem with that for me is that if I have a French press and I cold brew the coffee and I decide to push it down to strain it, I need to use all that coffee right away or transfer it out of that French press, because otherwise the water is just sitting there with the coffee in it, continuing to cold brew, which you don't need to do past that time, especially if you're going to keep it. So what do I use? I use this device here. Now, I am not saying you need to buy this one at all. This is a gift that was actually given to me by my youngest daughter years ago. And sorry if it's not massively clean, but it's by Hario, Hario. They make a lot of different ones. But why I like this particular model is I like its size. And you'll see the filter on it is a lot thinner than you would get on a French press. I mean, that's like micro thin. That's what you're going to want to have. The bottom unscrews here, so when you're done, you can shake the grounds out. But I take this, and for this size pitcher, hey, I set it to 4 ounces of ground coffee. Grind my coffee, coarse ground, stick it inside, place this here, pour the water slowly on the top because otherwise it will just fill up. You can't just gush the water down. Let it fill up. Then you can take this part here, put it on top, cold brew your coffee. Now, if you cold brew your coffee on your counter, you can. That's like making sun tea. There's some individuals who don't like to do sun tea because they feel that it maximizes the chances of bacteria or stuff like that. I don't know if that's going to be the case because of the acidic nature of the water with the coffee, but if you do it at room temperature, you are going to end up having coffee quicker because it only takes about 12 to 16 hours to get cold brew coffee that'll work. I still stick it in the fridge. Does it take longer? Yeah, it usually takes about 16 to 24 hours, but I think the taste is better. So that's what I do. So for those out there who think cold brew coffee is just iced coffee, that it's not the same thing. If you've had iced coffee and you like it, that's great. Iced coffee is just taking drip coffee. I guess it could be espresso, but it's usually drip coffee that you have, or French press coffee, and pouring it over ice and lowering the temperature. Cold brew coffee expresses exactly how it's brewed. It's brewed with colder water over a longer period of time. It'll be a more flavorful, more mellow cup of coffee. It may not be for everybody, but I can tell you it has changed my life, right, Dustin? Yes. In fact, I make stupid videos about it. That's how much it's changed my life. So keep tasting like a boss. If you have any more questions or some tips that you'd like, let me know in the comments. Please hit subscribe and share and add it with your friends and everything else. And tell me about your cold brew experiences. And also realize this is just my suggestions, but you can do it any way you want. But I would suggest not using alkaline water. I would suggest obviously using something that's other than a French press if you're going to keep it longer. And what I meant by that is after it's done brewing, after the 16 to 24 hours, take this, make sure the liquid's out, take this, throw the grinds in the trash, not down the disposal, down the trash. And then I've got a pitcher here that I can use to pour my coffee. It's in the fridge. What's not happening? I don't have water just sitting in coffee grounds for hours more through the day because I'm not necessarily going to drink all this at one time. If you do use bottled water, what I would suggest is you save those bottles after you pour them in so that when you're done, at least you can double purpose those bottled waters by pouring this water into those bottles, and then you have little tiny bottled waters you can keep in your bottled cold brew coffee that you can keep in your fridge, bring with you, take with you. And once that's empty, you can start doing your next batch. You don't need to have 2 of these, which I do not have, although I've been thinking about it. Anyway, keep tasting like a boss, and have a great weekend. What do you say, Dustin? What do you say? He hasn't barked really, so. Bye!